So, in addition to these residents being 3,000 miles away from New York, from Ground Zero and the attacks on the World Trade Center, many of the residents who are African American women in this focus group who discuss some of the issues and concerns that they have, again, in this non directed focus group, express that there are many other issues that are going on that they have to live with and contend with on a daily basis. Amongst these is the persistent racism that surrounds them in everyday life, as well as poverty or economic marginalization, and along with that, the care for children, many of whom have serious illnesses, diseases, or disabilities. Again, September 11th for these women, as they talk to one another, becomes something that's rather isolated. It becomes something that's 3,000 miles away. It does not necessarily impact their lives. A few days after the events, they were able to settle back into the everyday routines that they had done before. In fact, one of the women in the focus group reports how she shows up at work and is expecting to be able to work because she needs the money in order to care for her child. And her boss asks her what she's doing there, and she says that she's there to work. And her boss, basically, this is interpreted or read as sort of the valor of Americans, and this gets picked up not only here but in other contexts. This idea of Americans wanting to return to work, that this refusal to show fear, this act of courage in the face of these terrorist attacks, but it was not universally thought about in that way. It was just based, in some instances, on a very real need to get back to work. As I mentioned before, African American women were exposed to fear, and this was already a large part of their everyday routines in a racially charged environment in Los Angeles. They noted that homegrown terrorism is as much a part of America as apple pie. One barber in Jacksonville, Florida, that Mattingly Lawler and Jacob Huey quote from, says, "Welcome to my world, this idea of fear, this idea of looking up and wondering when the next terrorist attacks are going to come, the everyday fear that one might be accosted by individuals, and the concern over that overall in a racially charged environment." Some thought that white people were taking 9/11 hard because they had the luxury to do so. In other words, there wasn't anything else that they were preoccupied with or worried about. And there was also skepticism in this group over the way that the media had portrayed bin Laden. Mattingly and others go to a number of other studies that they cite to, and they note that there were differences in the initial reaction, or what the initial reaction should be between differently situated actors within American society. And along the lines of gender, we see that females were, the way that women in this focus group conceptualized it is that females noted that more killing was not going to make it any better, whereas they talked about males as high on testosterone, and this was the official U.S. position as portrayed in the U.S. media. Mattingly and others cite to studies that note a 20-point difference in initial forays into Afghanistan, retaliation or attacks into Afghanistan post 9/11 between males and females. Two, we see this along the lines of race, with 90% supporting initial endeavors versus 70% of African Americans. Jesse Jackson is noted for also commenting on this in the reactions to 9/11, that many non-African Americans were in a sense of shock for a long period of time after 9/11 that did move to outrage, but according to Jackson, many didn't move into more critical questioning about why the attacks were perpetrated, by whom, and towards what end and what purpose. I think this quote is really telling. It is not reflective of thoughts or opinions or feelings of women or African Americans or African American women, but one particular woman who does note in the focus group that my reaction as a white person would be to go over there and nuke them. As a black person, I have a little more empathy for the people. So I think that speaks a little bit to the aspects of the racially charged environment that this particular individual lives within. And this notion of empathy and how this could potentially be extended to other individuals, other common individuals that might in fact be targeted, attacked, or quote unquote collateral damage in attacks. So in this lecture, I hope to have given you a good sense of terrorism from Kunzar and others, this more objective approach to terrorism and what constitutes terrorism, how individuals are in fact not necessarily freedom fighters versus terrorists, but if we apply these measures objectively, we can measure terrorism objectively. The impacts of terrorism, of course, are broad-ranging, not only for the fear that is given or attempt to be given to population, but also the real and everyday impacts that individuals in said population will subject themselves to in order to protect themselves. And too, with this, we see resistance, as you can see from the picture here to the right, of things like screening procedures that are done in the name of security overall. And so there have been a number of protests of individuals either going through the line naked or in their underwear to attempt to critique this as a violation, these screening procedures as a violation of privacy under the Constitution. In addition to Kunzar's work, I've talked specifically about the terrorist attacks of 9/11 and how these have been framed by differently situated audiences. We can see official representations of the terrorist attacks as an attack or an assault on freedom. And in the global war on terror, we can really begin to question how successful that's been given the increase in the number of deaths caused by terrorism, the five-fold increase between the year 2000 and 2013. Indeed, race, gender, and identity as a whole matter in how individuals conceptualize the terrorist attacks of 9/11.